All right, everybody, it's now 12 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. Welcome inside the Drive Time Exchange. This is New Era TT Radio. And of course, inside of the Drive Time, this is where we are joined by Tony Fraser, and he has some guests with him today. And if you hear any noise in the background by me, Tony, I have some serious campaigning going on right now.
Campaigning seems to be going on everywhere.
Yes,
right?
yes. A lot of noise, a lot of people in the area this afternoon.
Sugar Island, right?
Sugar.
Sugar Island. Well, Chalo, we're going to spread the Trinidad and Tobago elections spirit from the Sugar Island to places far and wide where Trinis have settled, and some of them for a long time. Trinis are people who go all over the place. You can't go any place in this world. I went to Zimbabwe once, and in the middle of all of this, way over in Africa, a fella come up and he said, I find you sounding like a Trini. I said, well, you sounding like a Trini too. So that Trinis are everywhere.
Everywhere, I tell you.
We have with us this afternoon some of my very good long-standing colleagues who have settled elsewhere outside of Trinidad and Tobago in the region, but nevertheless up to scratch and, always in touch with what's happening in the homeland. Von Martin. Von has been away for more time than he has been in Trinidad, right, Von? I think your microphone is not on.
He's muted.
Yeah. Hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So Von is from Caribbeana Radio, a Washington special, and he has been doing it for how many years, Von? 40 years?
Yeah, 48 years.
48 years, almost 50 years, a lifetime.
Yeah.
Not as long as him, but nevertheless long as Erickson Bernard from Radio Trinidad. And all of these people have been my colleagues at one point in time or the other. Eric, how are you, my friend?
I am doing well, Tony. Good to see you. Good to see Vaughn, and good to see Mr. Maharaj.
Right.
Hey.
Eric was away, and then he came home, and then he went back away. He seems to love away. What station are you hooked up to, Eric?
I currently work with Team Soca. I do the weekend wake-up programming, and I have the privilege of doing some content that brings the community on a global scale. But I think what's makes it more enjoyable is that we are reaching, the other folks from the other West Indian islands.
Okay.
That's kind of cool.
Right. When West Indians are abroad and the pressures of outside close in on them, they know about coherence. Rainier Maharaj, who has, I don't know how long he's been away, but readers of local newspapers will I'm sure, remember Rainier. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Tell our listeners where you are and what you're doing.
I'm an international journalist, been in Toronto 36 years or so. I've written for a number of publications and stuff here, including Toronto Sun. I was a columnist with quite a number of years. I was also the publisher of Caribbean Camera newspaper, which was popular in the Caribbean in Canada. These days, I'm involved more in the digital space. I do 3 different publications. One serious news, one entertainment news, and the other one is more of a companion show called Canadian Now, which was in response to the Trump tariffs against Canada and the movement that has started in Canada.
Right.
It's a patriotic thing. There's a big buy Canadian movement in Canada.
Right. Canada has something in...
Sorry?
I'm just telling our listeners that Canada has something in concert with Trinidad and Tobago. The election day, the 28th, the same day as Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know how that came about. I don't know who followed who, but nevertheless, we are together in this spot. And then a man who is not in journalism as we know it, but in a different kind of cultural sphere. A man called Sonny Blacks. Sonny, where are you?
Well, Tony, I haven't been able to hook up with him, and I've been trying, but I haven't been able to connect with him as yet.
Well,
So
as we
once I get
start here,
him,
keep
yeah,
trying
I'll let you know.
and see if we can contact him. Just to say that Sonny Blacks is an impresario out in London. He worked in Europe for a long, long time. And you ask any calypsonian or musician, steel bandsman who has gone abroad to a show, and they will know of Sonny Blacks, an entrepreneur, a man who put on shows with from Rudder to Stalin to Sparrow to everybody of any calypso significance. And hopefully we'll get Sonny on the he's, of course, he's in London, so we're going extra continental, as it were, both in the hemisphere and outside of the hemisphere. So, gentlemen, I have one initial question to ask all of you as we start off, is to what is, as far as you can tell, given your media people, you're in touch where you may have radio programs that are targeting Trinidadians and West Indians generally. Let me start with Vaughn to ask, what's the situation like in your area, in the Washington, Baltimore, a kind of area with regard to the Trinidadian groups? And are they interested in the elections that are coming up at the end of this month?
Well, Tony, it's not a vocal expression that is made about the elections. The community has changed tremendously, and I'm sure Eric can concur to that. In the early days, when you had an association that was steering the movement of Trinidad and Tobago to the community and having dialogue, it doesn't exist anymore. That association is still around, but they're doing it on a more subtle level.
How do you account for that, Vaughn?
Boy, I think the activities of the diplomats used to be very vigilant in those early days and would attract the community. That doesn't exist anymore. The community has changed. You know,
I suppose that generation has gone by.
That is what I was not going to say, that the older generation is no longer around doing things. The younger people are more into the business of pets. Like just weekend, we had Nyla Blackman here, you know, and the older folks are more into trying to maintain themselves, their health and their well-being. And so therefore, the community has changed in a sense. With regards to the elections of Trinidad and Tobago, it's not a talked about topic. And so as a result, you can't find people saying, well, we want to see who's there, who's coming there, that kind of thing. What you may hear spoken about is that as long as whoever gets in power, they do the right thing. What that means is another story.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so therefore, the dialogue for the community and the elections isn't really vigilant. You know, people just ain't talking about it, you know, but they talk about it in their homes, perhaps, their families, you know, husband and wives may chat a little with the nephews and the daughters and sons and so on. But it's not a vigilant expression of concern, you know.
Right. You know, Vaughn, you said something there which also almost triggered me to take you in a different direction in terms of the West Indian communities abroad. And are we losing space while other people are gaining their territory and we don't have the kind of sway as that perhaps we should have? But I will leave that till we deal with the election matter, and then we come back to that as another point, if we have time at the end of all of this. Let me go to Rainier Mirage. Rainier, what's the situation? I presume you're in Toronto, and if so, what's the situation in Toronto with regard to interest in the election, and what are the issues that people may be talking about?
Well, yes, Toronto. just like Vaughn said, it's not it's nothing that's been talked. When I was editing the weekly newspaper, it was something that would have been talked about all the time because people would call into the office and chat and come and visit about the election, and there would be a lot more concern. But as one public community has just everybody now in the digital space, everybody's getting their own information from their own source. And the discussion, I think is largely among households. So, I guess if you go out to an event or something, you would hear people talking. But I do think there's concern beyond that. Whoever is elected, clearly back into a proper place, because this has become sort of embarrassing up in Toronto anyway, where there's a very strong Guyanese team. The Guyanese keep cases in it, saying, hey, look at you used to laugh at us, look at you guys now. So, we laugh because we take old talk, because that's what we do. But it's become sort of a embarrassing thing to our flight. So that's an example. Caribbean Airlines from to Trinidad used to be where it was Toronto, Port of Spain, then go on to Georgetown. Now, I think a lot of them now are going to Toronto to Georgetown and then going to Port of Spain. So it's sort of idea of priorities are now online, and the oil is following the money, and it gives you that people don't see Trinidad, well, not people, Trinidadians per se, but others don't see Trinidad as being the beat that it used to be. And I think if there's one concern about is that whoever's government could put the there. How, I don't know. I'm not on the ground at Trinidad to know, what the plans are per se. But I think that's the concern here, is that tree is put up on top of a solid footing.
Erickson Bernard will tell us which radio. I think he told us already which radio station he's associated with, and what's the interest in New York? Eric is in New York, and one would think that New York is a little bit more central than Toronto and Washington and so on, and so maybe there's greater interest in New York.
Yeah. New York could be broken down, for those who are not familiar, into 5 boroughs. Of those 5 boroughs, you would find that Trinidadians are predominantly in Brooklyn and Queens. If you want to probably take it from a Trinidad perspective, let's say that Brooklyn is your east-west corridor, and let's say that Queens is your central-south zone. So you can break it down like that.
Right. I like the geographical spread, and I suspect there are other elements of the social world inside of that geographical spread.
Yes. Now, like Vaughn indicated earlier on, the people who I would say who are under 40 are pretty much don't really care about the politics. They might be more interested in when is the next carnival date.
Right.
They tend to find themselves as the ones in Toronto and Miami and Montreal and all wherever the carnivals take place. Then you would find those who are, I would say, in the 70s or whatever, who are like not really into it as much. But I would say the people who are like between the age of like 40 and let's say 65 are the ones who are engaged, is because they're involved in social media and Facebook, and they know what's happening home, and they have these discussions taking place. What I have found is that
is home still a word that is used, Eric?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
And the word home is used even with those who are under 40, even the second and third generations who were born here. If you were to other place and say who's from Trinidad, they would raise their hands as if they were born in Trinidad.
I asked that because a friend of mine in Toronto used the home word to me recently. Now, there's somebody who's been there 35, 40 years, I don't know how long. And I say, what? You say you still, Trinidad is still your home? And she got quite offended
Yes.
that
Well,
differently. But
you know,
that's another
Tony,
story.
there's a saying in the diaspora that those of us who live abroad are much more patriotic than those who live
Yes.
at home.
So true.
Okay, you see, we feel that way strongly.
Yeah, so go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's quite okay. So, what I have found is that people are pretty much stuck in their traditional political party corners. You know, who happen to be a UNC is still a UNC, who's still a PNM. The people who I consider to be non-aligned, they're just Trinidadians who we don't, you know, just want to be the country. They have expressed a position of like wanting change, and they don't necessarily see change as it might occur or look in the current PNM party. I've heard them even talk about Mrs. Pandey as a person that, you know, they're interested in. But what I find, regardless of where a person line up, the two things which come up very often is that they all agree on. One is crime, and two, I guess because we live in North America, they often wonder why the leaders don't have a debate of some sort among themselves for the electorate to make a decision.
Yeah, interesting. Let me see if I could bounce what Eric said off of both Vaughn and Rainier. How do you react to what Eric has said? You don't have to wait for me to jump into the fire. You all are experienced journalists, and if you think I'm talking too much and taking up your time, jump in and say so. Gentlemen, let me hear you.
I would say that America is on track there with people want change, and the change that occurred in the PNM. This is the feedback I'm getting. The change seeing is not significant enough, but they see Stuart Young as just being a replacement for Rowley, and that the policies and everything will continue under Stuart Young as is under Rowley, which the general feeling is it's not in the best country. There's a thing, as Eric said, you know, the people who have been here for decades, they were either UNC before they left, or became UNC and stopped that, or they would have left and became up here and stuck with PM. You know, they're not exposed. We need to have a problem in the sense that when we hear about what's going on in Trinidad, we read the newspapers or we go through social, what we tend to hear is the negative things. We hear about the crime, we hear about the, you know, somebody get robbed in the thing, somebody home invasion, somebody went TFR, and all that kind of stuff. And what's in the gas is that we don't see the little good things, you know, oh, Tanti Milky cows, pop curtains, look, this lady make nice cookies on the roll, I'm going to go and buy. The lady tastes decent good. Those things that make life livable in Trinidad. Mm-hmm. So we in the diaspora remove from that. So we don't really get the good with the bad, we only get the bad.
Right.
so
Rainier, let me
it's very hard for us.
Yeah.
That's why I think those who go ahead.
On the subject of change, what about change within the UNC? Do people, supporters or not supporters of the UNC, think about change? I just read a very caustic statement by Devant Maharaj about the leadership question, and I know he has been pounding this beat about the leadership within the UNC, not so much the UNC as a party and the constituents of the party, but rather the leadership, i.e. Kamla Prasad Bisasa. Are you getting the same kind of requirement for change on that political side?
No, to be honest, no. You know, when Russia was up here, I think it was late last year. I went and I met him. We sat down, we had some doubles and stuff together. And, he talked a good talk about what his plans were and his ambitions were and stuff like that. This is before he even announced that he was going to challenge this leadership of these. And one of the things that came up in the conversation, we cautioned him in the sense that the TT that Mrs. Prasad Bisasa gets from the general membership of the party, it's a hard thing to break it. I know Ivan Maharaj's aunt very well. And we have had a conversation once or twice about that as well. She obviously supports her views. Certainly, there should be leadership change in the UN. But I think generally, overall, tend to be okay. She wasn't a bad prime minister when she was there. Her to come back now, there shouldn't be. If you change from the UNC in a election year, you risk losing the momentum that the UNC could have built up over that period, last 4 years that it had.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of uncertainty about.
I can't understand
about them wanting.
Sorry, go ahead, finish your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think there's much support here for a change of leadership in the EU, as there may be in Trinidad. I think people are pretty satisfied with what they see, what they saw under the last UNC government, and again, we don't live there, so we don't see the good along with the bad. We only get a lot of the bad. So our opinions here will form as an opinion made in Trinidad. So. But to answer your question, no, I don't support for a change there at all.
Yeah. I want you to explain a little bit more. I don't understand this requirement for change on the one hand, in terms of leadership, where there has been change in the PNM, but not a desire for change within the UNC. When you have a political leader who has lost 2 general elections and 2 or 3 local government elections and has not been able to avoid the conflict within the party. Is it that you're saying towards the end of your statement, you make a difference between what people want in Trinidad with regard to the UNC and what people may want in Toronto, Canada, with regard to the leadership of the UNC? How do you explain that?
I don't know how to explain that. I think it's just because people here, again, we get news through a filter. We get a filter because we are not living there. So we get filtered news here. And from that filter, we make our judgment calls based on that filter. Not me personally, because I am obviously more engaged, more involved in Trinidad than the average person who tries average Trinidadian. But the general population of Trinidadians up here, they still see Trinidad as how they left it in 1980 or 1970 or 1990. They hold, I guess, the leadership of the parties to different standards. I don't know. But it is very clear, like if you go to a Trinidadian event here, it's very clear where the loyalties lie. And a lot of the loyalties are formed from ethnic bias. So if you go to, if I go to a Tobago event here, the majority of the people of African descent, you would find a very strong PNM sentiment, a very strong fought for Rowley and whatever. Whereas if you go to an Indian event, when I say an Indian event, an event where more Indo-Trinidadians are in attendance, you find more on the UNC side. So the ethnic question is very, very, very easy to discern in here. Very easy to figure out who is who, where they are politically.
Yeah.
So I don't know how all of that plays into it, but it still exists.
No, I think I understand you now. You were saying that the people there are making judgments perhaps on a generational thing when they were here in Trinidad, but yes, being up in the north, they hold on to those loyalties that they knew from home.
Yes.
Am I getting you clear on that?
Yes.
All right. Now,
Yes.
let me take up that same leadership issue with Vaughan Martin and Eric Sinbernard. And incidentally, Chalu, if at any point in time you get Sonny Blacks on the line, feel free to interrupt and tell us that he's here. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. Eric,
I think the polarization is the same here.
sorry, this is Vaughan for our listeners who are not seeing as we are seeing. Vaughan Martin talking about the leadership question and the requirement for change.
Right, right. Well, the polarization does exist here as well. The community, you have the East Indian community are hunkered together, you know, the temples, the mosques and so forth. They commune together. They're in the business aspect of as well. And the Africans, typical work, governmental work, diplomatic work, and those kinds of activities. But it's not an expressive support extended to the leadership in the country, in Trinidad and Tobago. For example, you don't hear much about Stuart Young and what he will do or what he could do for the country. And that's of a concern to some of us, you know. The young people, looking at the young people, when there were lots of crime going on, people were very concerned. They were talking about the crime. They were concerned about going home. Now that has sort of subdued. We are finding that young people are now trying to generate themselves in a different vein. So again, the thing is, I think because of the absence of organizations within the community that gives the community a sort of a leadership to move, that is impacting on the response to their homeland.
Okay.
So people still love Trinidad. They're going home, you know, that kind of thing.
What of the leadership question? I think everybody knows that Keith Rowley as Prime Minister had some strengths that he displayed over a period of time, but he had a lot of weaknesses, perceived weaknesses by people. People thought him to be arrogant and self-opinionated and so on. And now that leadership has changed and changed in a significant kind of way, there were people who could think about a man of Chinese and Indian descent. Well, he's not a political leader of the PNM just yet. I'm sure that he will. PNM will hold together, notwithstanding anything, especially if the party were to win and retain the government. Is that change satisfying to people in your era, Washington, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't know, you know, because up here we have another problem that we are facing, and that's the Trump problem. And it's preoccupying people. People are concerned about returning home. And if they go home, well, they'll be allowed to come back in and all those kinds of things. So that's one impact that we see taking place. In terms of whether Stuart Young is a good leader or not, it's still out. It hasn't. People haven't responded strongly as yet. You know, because Stuart Young is a different image, Chinese mixed with white. You know, so you know people aren't as yet prolific in their expression of support in that sense.
And I suppose he is not a hardcore PNM of a couple of generations.
Right.
So people may not know too much about him.
About him, exactly.
But,
so.
Are they happy that Rowley has left town, chosen to leave town? Behind a set of barricade?
Some has. I mean, for me, I never really had much to do with him. That kind of arrogance was meted out to me once, and I just shut the door. I ain't deal with it, you know.
You don't have to take that shit, right?
Right,
yeah. Hey, Tony, if I can add some
Sure.
nuances to the discussion here. When you ask about change, what I'm getting even talking from people who support the UNC
Right.
is that they would have preferred change too, but at the end of the day, their support for the party is bigger than the person at the head of the party itself.
Okay.
But
Okay.
there are two other things. We talk about Stuart Young, and what I get, I mean, strongly from people here in Brooklyn, even in Queens, all over New York, is that they had a preference for Penny Beckles, and it's easy to understand why. Remember, she was living here among us for a number of years
Right.
as the
Yes.
UN ambassador,
Ambassador to the
right?
UN and so on.
Right. And the thing is, I can say to you also, I have a hard time calling her Minister Beckles. I tend to call her Penny, and most of us do,
Right.
because there was never a bake sale that she didn't show up to. There's never a pan line that she wasn't part of. There wasn't
Yes.
a parent get together. So she has been able to really lock down the New York diaspora, if you could use that term, to have that kind of support. And when you talk to them, I think there was some level of hope that she would have been the next anointed person. Last but not least, if I may, is that the last time PM Rowley was here, there was a town hall meeting that Miss Beckles put together, full place turned out, East Indians, African, the full works. And one person raised a question that the entire crowd applaud for. And the question was, why don't you all allow us to vote?
Right.
So Rowley right away said, no, too
Yeah.
many of you guys outside here. So it tells you that in New York, then that passion, that interest, that engagement is very strong in what happens in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, you know, coming to the program, I had to double check in my mind and check in the reality about this whole business of nationals abroad voting. Yes, you're right. It has come up for discussion at some point in time. And you're also right that when he was Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley was totally against it and so on. But I suppose that's something that perhaps will make Trinidadians abroad feel more at home or feel greater links with Trinidad and Tobago. Is that something that is happening in Toronto, Rainier?
No, there's been talk about the voters here being allowed to vote, but from a very personal stand, I don't think should be. We should not be allowed to vote. We don't live there, so why should we have a say in what happens? We live in other countries. We should be voting because your vote has a direct impact on life and your lifestyle. So why should we who live away have a say in what happens in Trinidad and what affects the people in Trinidad? So one of the things I actually agree with Dr. Rowley is no, we shouldn't be allowed to vote. But having said, I still think that the diaspora, whether it's New York or Toronto or Canada, we do have an influence on relatives and family there. So like the city of foreign stuff like that, we might be talking to and tell them, well, hey, if you get for the right people, we can actually influence them. So I think that the parties, any party that is running for election in Trinidad, should always engage diaspora, always try to come up here. Not too long, and 15 years ago, when every year we would get a prime minister, we'd get a visit from the opposition leader, and they would have these little town hall meetings until they used to be big. And we need to actually engage with the leaders of the parties, or the opposition leader, whoever it was, and ask direct questions. It has stopped. I don't know what's the reason for stopping it. I can't name the last time a prime or even the opposition leader or anybody of that style has ever come. The last time I know of anybody being here was Miss Albisasa when she was Prime Minister. And there was a big event held by our Prime Minister in Canada for her. Just like a queen, she came here at the Royal venues in the country. And, had a fancy dinner and everything else for her. But that engaged the in a group in a big way, because now we got a chance to meet her, talk to us, and ask questions directly. I don't think Sir Rowley ever came here. Dr. Rowley ever came here as prime. And I think that's a big problem. That's that's one of the reasons why the diaspora is no longer as engaged as they used
to. Yeah, you're right on that. I know Patrick Manning, when he was prime minister, he made a lot of trips to New York. I'm not too sure about Toronto, but he made a lot of trips to New York and even to London, as I remember. But so coming back to this question of identity and feeling part of the country, some Trinis. Even when they go abroad and they get citizenship from abroad and they come down here and they don't use, if they don't have a Trini passport, and they get to the immigration department, and an immigration officer who might be a quarter of their age tell them that they only have 2 weeks in the country and they stamp their passport, American passport, they get highly indignant about it. I know that personally. My sister, who has been living abroad for 50 plus years, and anytime an immigration officer tell her that she only have 2 weeks, she ready to start fight at the Trini kind of thing. But I suppose you can't have it two ways. And in the environment, I'm sure that Vaughn and Eric are fully aware of it. Trinis going abroad and using their Trinidad passport and coming back with their US passport, they stand some problems at Kennedy. I read a story about an immigration officer. I think she was from Africa, some part of Africa, and she used her African, whatever the nation is, passport. And when she came back to the airport, they took away the American passport from her, saying that she had no need for it. I don't know if that is happening anywhere where you fellas are.
I've heard it. Go ahead. No, I've heard it spoken about, but I don't know how real and true it is. But there's so much concern, because there's a lot of uncertainties going on. In ISIS, the immigration police are coming in and taking people and so forth. Although I'm seeing they're taking a lot of Latino people. I'm not seeing much black faces. But it's the times that we live in, and it's what the current administration is doing and setting stage with,
Yeah. Eric, what about you? Trinis getting annoyed when they get stopped at Piaco and questioned?
Well, I think the one that I know that everybody cusses about is when they are asked how long you're staying for.
Yes.
That ticks off every national upon entry. But as far as that thing,
that is true.
Yeah, I know. As far as the issue with the U.S. passport, the thing is, social media has so many things floating around.
Right.
But someone did present information from the U.S. State Department, which claims that whichever passport you go out with, you should be the ones returning. So if you leave with a U.S. passport, you're supposed to use that as your port of entry for where you go in. Now, you mentioned a while ago, Tony, and this is like a big thing here in New York. When you talk about not having the right, to vote, what Mr. Maharaj talked about, I'm not sure if, and I'm sure maybe Toronto can relate to this too, the amount of nationals living abroad with investments in Trinidad, be it homes, be it money, many of them are building homes and things like that and have money in the unit trusts and all these, things that they take place. So I think it's a bit unfair to make the argument that because we live abroad, but I think it might be a big US thing, because we in the US here are very familiar with Americans who are living abroad.
Eric, it's sounding like if you're telling your own story there, but go ahead.
No, I'm talking about being in basement with men lying and hearing the old talk going on, right?
Okay.
That's a real discussion. But I think from an American perspective, because we are so used to knowing Americans who live in abroad have the right to vote. So we tend to make that equation, because if Vaughn goes home for 2 years as an American citizen, he can still vote in the US election. So I believe that is the mindset that we would get from Trinidadians living in the US.
Right. And if of course Vaughn turns up at a polling station in San Fernando, they call the police for him, you know. Okay, seriously, gentlemen, what of the issues of the election that are being articulated here on the platform? Are they reaching where you are in New York and Toronto and Washington and so on? Or is it just the noise of the campaign reaching that far? You tell me, Rainier.
The noise of the campaign is actually not reaching us at all. See and hear again is basically from social media or do actually go onto the news websites and stuff like that, or perhaps even listen to your radio station. But I don't. It's generating the kind of interest I've seen in this particular election. I think people are just saying, "Oh, well." For us here in Canada, I think we engage both because our election is actually the same day as Trinidad election, and there's a big, very similar circumstances involved in both elections in the world, and each called by new prime ministers and stuff like that. So more people because of what's happening here. They're concerned about, obviously, they're concerned about what's happening in Trinidad too, but not doesn't speak. So the noise from the campaign is reaching us.
I agree.
Things here and there, but you know, general how it used to be long ago is not like that anymore. I don't.
Yeah, I quite agree. I quite agree.
And
Yeah.
in reality too, you can't blame people, even people here. You know, I tried yesterday to get a senior economist in Trinidad and Tobago to come on a program tomorrow, the following day, to talk about the economic policies of the two parties. And he said, what policies are you talking about? Where's the manifesto? What statement? You think I have, and he's responding to me in this way, you think I have time to go and listen to every platform we'll talk to the issues? No.
Sorry, guys. Earbuds here for a reason. For no reason. I'm hoping I could do shortly. That's all.
I'm not too sure I hear that. You broke up a little bit in that piece. You want to repeat it? Sorry.
No, he was just fixing his earbuds.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, Vaughn, what about the issues of the campaign? Have they come through, or it's just...
No, I'm getting noise.
Yeah.
See if I could just disconnect from here, but talk on this regular speaker.
Yeah. No, I not like Rainier said, not sufficient of the issues are being presented, are made popular, made known out here. You know, so folks are still trying to understand.
I'm not hearing Vaughn, and Tony is on mute. Tony, you're on mute.
Okay,
All right.
Somehow our microphones went off, but I think we are back on now.
Yeah,
Yes,
we should
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was saying that not sufficient of the information from home is made known out here. It's not propagated as much. So people have to search and find and try to identify and that sort of thing, you know. But again, I'm going back to the fact that people are concerned with what's being propagated by the leadership of both parties, you know. I had a chance to interview a young man from Point this morning, and I was impressed because he was talking about certain programs that they were developing in Moruga that is being touted as something that is progressive and helpful for the younger generation. If that is the kind of dialogue that is being presented, yeah, let's move on, you know.
Yeah. Eric, and any of the issues coming through to the big city?
No, Tony, I mean, it's interesting that you raised the question. I'm here thinking now that in this space of global media where we all have more access, people who I know literally watch TV6 News online and CCN News online and listen to the various radios in the mornings and the talk shows and things like that. But in talking to people, you are not hearing about issues. I am sad to report to you that the only thing I would have heard, and I heard this, I think was last weekend in a little lime or whatever, when a couple people said that the UNC had a better campaign song this time around. So, that's how trivial it has become, right? But again, the only thing that I know that they all gather around is the concern over crime. And I guess that's the concern because they all travel home and want to go home and read the headlines and see these things.
Well, I mean, just to be fierce, here the political parties, and incidentally, the two major parties are carrying their rallies every night on the television stations. A lot of money is circulating. My good friend Vishnu Raghunath raised the issue on the weekend in an article in the Sunday Guardian about the spending. There's a whole lot of money spending, as all of you men will know, that buying television space in prime time in an election campaign does not cost 25 cents. It's a heavy cost on the political parties every night. There is no weekend rally anymore. Every night, the two major political parties are staging their rallies online, and indeed, the UNC has been on for, I don't know, the last 3 months of Monday night meetings, carrying them and so on. Of course, something we could talk about. The political parties have been talking themselves about campaign finance reform for the last 25 years. They don't do anything about it because that will curtail the kind of funding that they get from the business corporations. And of course, the business corporations encourage that because their names are not in the list of campaign financiers, but you can be sure that they're there. And on the day after the election, they come with their hat to make sure that they get their returns from their investment. No question about that.
Tony, it's possible you have just articulated the disconnect in the sense that they are using Stone Age tactics in the modern technology age, right? No one sits down and wants to listen to a campaign for 3 or 4 hours if you're looking abroad, right? A lot of times now people curtail 30 seconds, whatever, and digital and a song bite and put it. And I think that could be the disconnect of people living abroad not getting the substance because the majority of people will not be willing to sit down. There'll be like a real hardcore, die-hard, maybe just come from the island to do that and being a hardcore party supporter to sit down and listen to 3 hours online of some campaign.
Just for our listeners to know is that we are talking with three Trinidad journalists who operate abroad. One from Canada, Rainier Maraj, who has, portals and so on, and he can tell us about that. Erickson Bernard, well-known man here, the soca man in Radio Trinidad of the, what was that, the 1980s when we were... 90s. We had that radio station with Neil Giuseppe and Jones Madeira and Phil the Trill from Laventille and Dave Elcock and all of the big noise DJs of that particular period. Eric was one of them. And of course, Von Martin, who has been abroad for perhaps close to 50 years. And during the soca and the calypso and the politics and everything from up there, he even had a special, if you didn't know it before, he had a special responsibility to supply a certain Secretary of State with constant calypso music, right? The man's name was Powell, right? So he had that responsibility to represent the soca and calypso abroad. but that's another story. So that is what you're listening to on Sir Charles. If you want to break the chat for a little bit and give us a little minute or two. Last time you played that calypso by Bali, which I think is so powerful, and it's what, 25, 30 years old, but it's still
the party
wonderful
time.
to listen to. So can I make that special request? Give us a little breezer here, and we come back to the discussion. If there are people who want to join us, let them feel free so to do.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And of course, to your afternoon drive time exchange with Tony Fraser right here on New Era TT Radio. Bali party time. I hope you guys had a good time with it.
Yeah. Chalo, you know, as that song is being played, it came to my mind that before the election, we must have a program, and you will be the DJ playing the calypsos that surround the electioneering going back 30, 40 years.
Oh, cool. Look how much working on the committee.
You're taking on that assignment, partner?
Hey, Tony,
That's a good one.
hey, Tony, a little insight for you here. Zeno Obi is actually just done some research on that very said topic and put together a whole catalog of the music. You may want to contact.
Right. Chalo, we taking on that, right? Next week.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that Eric is saying that. Eric, is it Eric or Vaughn? But you know, if you guys collected, I would greatly appreciate if you could pass
I will send Tony Zeno's contact.
Yeah.
Zeno just finished that research.
Okay, fantastic.
Great. So we
I can send you some of my archives.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invite Zeno. I know we are in contact occasionally. I will contact Zeno and ask him to come and play some of the calypsos.
Magazine.
Yeah, plenty.
Magazine.
Incidentally, I have not heard a new election calypso for the season. I don't know if anybody else has, but I have not heard one. So that the singing not even reaching to the Calypsonians. Right. By the time next year come the Calypso, the subject matter stale. But maybe the election happening at this time of the year has
this guy pretty remake one of his songs for the PNM.
Okay. Right. I remember the 1986 election campaign that Bali is singing about now. It was loaded with calypso music. One of them being Chambers Dunsey. What's the man's name, Eric? Eric, remember his name?
Yeah, I think that Delphi or something. So his name was.
I was talking about
Plain clothes.
Well, whatever it is, but that too seems to be missing from the election campaign. The Calypsonians always get involved,
Right.
And there was a period of time. Yeah, there was a period of time also when the Calypsonians were on the platforms of the political parties. I well remember Crazy and what's his name died a few years ago. They were on the UNC.
Bali was on one time.
Bali was, yes, you're right.
Before
store. I remember him meeting me outside the bank on Marval Road and complaining bitterly that they had not paid him the money that they promised. I felt real sorry for him because he was not a man of great resources, and he sang his heart out for the political party. And they didn't pay him. I'm not going to call a political party before somebody in the party sue me. I made no arrangement with them, but he was well known on the political campaign. So, gentlemen, that was a little bit of interlude, but not straying from the point. It's part of the political electioneering culture that you would have Calypsonians singing about these matters. What about the emerging figures of the politics? Okay, Dr. Rowley has gone. A number of the UNC people have been, they didn't go voluntarily. They were forced out. Kamla Prasad Bisasa saying that after 15 years, she has finally purged the party of, again, in the election before, incidentally, there was Suruj and some of those Minister of Education, etc., who some of them left voluntarily, some of them were pushed out, and then again, that happened again this year with a number of people. The man from Mayaro, etc., they were pushed out. What of the political figures, the main spokespersons on platforms? Rania, are you hearing about them at all?
Well, I don't know. I I am in a unique position in that because of in bringing Caribbean new people in Canada, I am far more involved in the politics of the island than the average person out there. Um, long again, coming back to long ago, when had the weekly paper and every week would carry news, like this person has been named the candidate for wherever,
Mhm.
people will get familiar names. I think now there's no more of that that anymore. And on top of that, and coming back to the fact that the diaspora is not engaged in political parties themselves, there's a disconnect. Um, People just want to see at the end of the day was, and they will have their own opinions of it at the end of it. But I think what it has come down to, let's see who wins.
Yeah.
There's no longer that engagement. There's no longer that sort of a thing where we could say, well, okay, Dr. Rowley is coming up. We're going to have a town hall meeting. Let's go talk to him. Let's go ask him because he'll bring. Normally, if somebody of that caliber come up here, you would have other ministers coming up with him. So we get familiar with the ministers. We get familiar with the key people in the party. That no longer happens. So
Yeah.
there's a huge disconnect between the dialogue was going on in Trinidad, at least the diaspora. The calypsos. Long ago when we had calypsos around election, we'll get with the election campaign through the calypsos. That no longer, so there's, I mean, as Eric said earlier, the only thing everybody knows now up here is that thing for UNC when the UNC will even is it as the best song come out of Trinidad for the election campaign, and it's not even a song, it's just a campaign thing. That's what everybody knows, because again, there's a huge disconnect between the diaspora and the on the island.
Yeah. Rainier, what have you heard about those former UNC MPs who were ditched for this election? A number of them, man from Mayaro, etc., etc. Has that been spread abroad in the Toronto community in any significant way that this one has exited, that one has been pushed out, that kind of thing?
No, the only here in the Canadian diaspora would be the one from Mayaro from Russia because he came here,
Right.
and he met the community meeting. People got to know who he was, and avoid that because he had American leader. So he made it come up here, and he had an event. So people knew who he was. Like normally, if you ask me who the people from Mayaro, who's the candidate, I would have a clue. But this particular time, I knew because she met the man. But beyond, unless they actually make that effort to come up here and make themselves known, especially someone who might have leadership ambitions, whether it's for the PPN or they need to, if they want to engage the diaspora, they have to come up and meet with diaspora. Otherwise, there's a huge disconnect between us and them. And it's not that we're not interested, it's just that there's no information. There's very little information. From the home, we get the information through social media. And you know what social media is like. You know what you get off of that, right? So there's a big disconnect. There is, unfortunately, very, very big disconnect.
Let me ask Eric if the word of people like Hines, who have been dropped, Rowley himself dropped from, well, self-dropped, if you like, has that made a significant difference in the New York area?
Before I answer, just to give you a heads up, I have to leave at 5:30. I apologize.
Okay, sure, no problem.
But again, people in general do not really know the players. In fact, if you talk about Heinz, they make reference to the water in Beetham, that was, that kind of thing. And that's because it was in social media so much that they picked up on it. The issue that I go back again, that everybody seems to talk about is crime. And is it because, like Maharaj pointed out, is what you see in the paper all the time? Is it because that they themselves look forward to going home and have a sense of care when they do that? But crime is the big thing. And as far as personalities, like stated before, the person who is probably known by, I mean, everyone in the New York area is Penny Beckles. And that's because for the 4 years she spent here, unlike other ambassadors or whatever, she made herself like a salt of the community and find herself in every little line you could talk about. So everybody knows her, but outside of her, okay, you hear Rowley, you hear Camilla, but there's no relationship, no whatever, and all the minions under them are pretty much unknown to the diaspora per se.
Yeah. As you talk about Penny Beckles, yes, she's also well liked here in Trinidad and Tobago. Some people are not too sure why she has developed this kind of image, because politically, in big political statements, she has not made any waves in that regard. People know her like you know her, as somebody who is cooperative, who is well known. You know, I go to the Central Market quite frequently, and I see her and she's walking around. I remember she's coming towards me and I'm saying, well, don't talk to me, you know, I just a little 2x4 reporter. All them people around here, your supporters, go and talk to them. So people love her in that kind of way, but I don't know that she has made a big political impression. What you can say about Penny Beckles is that she's quite resilient. Remember, she went through some difficulties with Patrick Manning. When he was prime minister, she was put in the doghouse at one point in time and so on. And she was shipped out. In fact, when you talk about her being in Washington, she was shipped out, out of the way kind of thing. That's an interesting. Some people still feel, you know, the situation with Stuart Young. He is, he's the prime minister now. And presumably, if the PNM were to win, he would be the prime minister again. But will Penny oppose him as political leader? That's an issue up front for the PNM to make a determination about. Let me ask Vaughn, if you've heard anything about the political figures and what they are doing, and who people know and who people don't know, etc.
No, nothing. I mean, like I said, the communities don't meet and congregate like we used to. And as a result, a lot of the talk is going on inside the homes, inside families, or in the restaurants and so on, you know. But it's not talked about a lot, you know. So, you know, but
losing our place. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Let me ask Eric before he leaves us, what of the dragon? Has that been, well, for people who are not fully aware, the dragon gas deal with Trinidad and Tobago, processing the gas from Venezuela, that agreement was put on by President Biden, and when it transferred to President Trump, he has scuttled the deal, which the government, the PNM was very invested in terms of making a difference over the next 4, 5, 6 years, because the Dragon Field, Coquina Field, they're supposed to have large quantities of gas in them for Trinidad and Tobago to process, and that has been scuttled. Has that made an impact at all in any of the places, New York, Toronto, and of course, Washington?
Well, in the New York scenario, the people who I could put into the category, very small amount of people who I consider to be hyper political. Okay. They are the ones who would probably have that discussion, and the discussion would be, you know, Trinidad, Venezuela, you know, the US, you know, Trump, Biden, whatever. But it's a very, very small amount. Big picture, it's not. And like I said very early on, you can break this thing up into 3 different categories. Vaughn pointed out that, you know, what the young people are into is like, you know, Kes come to New York and sell out 2 major shows in Central Park in less than an hour. You know, that is what those young people talk about. And the older ones, you know, might be more concerned, like again, Vaughn pointed out about the social security issue here in the US. So it's that demographic I consider to be between the age of 40 to, let me say, 65. If you want to take that person, that fellow who does leave here and go to Panorama. That is
Right.
the fella who
The
be getting
diehard.
involved in
Yeah.
what going on in
Yeah.
Trinidad in a serious way then.
Right. The legion ground in that regard. What about Eric again before you leave? What about the calypsos? And I am I from our old school. I don't even understand some of what these fellas sing these days. So we started up from a point of view. In terms of the music of the period, how are New Yorkers responding to that compared to what happened in the 90s and before that and so on?
That's an interesting question, Tony, and I want to say that unfortunately, Trinidad don't listen or get to hear all the soca that's being presented. Sad to say. The reality here in where we are, I tend to always call Brooklyn Mecca of soca because it's done and played all year long, non-stop. So there are a number of great songs that we have access to that Trinidad just don't hear because of your narrow carnival 6-week period and the whole commercial interest involved in it. As far as the music is concerned, like I said, Kest sold out Central Park, 2 shows, history in less than 2 hours, sold out. And he's touring all around, right? Marshall goes to, let's say, Barclays Center and pulls at 20,000 people. You have a lot of Jamaican promoters now hiring our voice will come out and do his own show and get 15, 12,000 people. So there is that, what I refer to as the enjoyable soca, and the young people always enjoy the old school too. The Nelson, the Scrunter, Sugar Boom Boom still get played. So, yeah, so
there is hope then.
yeah, but no, the thing is, I want you to keep in mind that the average person of third generation here, let's say 18 to 25, who wasn't even born in Trinidad, they are the ones who go every weekend to soca fets all around the world.
Right, right.
Mhm.
You know, and I don't think that Trinidad is aware of what is happening on that level with the music. You talk to Vaughn and these guys, I saw the nephews and nieces, whatever, you know, they are the ones who go to Miami all the time until there is not a weekend in Brooklyn. You don't have young people getting together to enjoy soca music.
Right,
The
right.
music could run anywhere from a scrunter to a current lava.
Okay.
But
All right.
even now you have Kiss on Cameron Hall's show, big time national TV, you know. And Nyla Blackman, she was just here in Washington last weekend, you know. So the young people have the soca thing going and they're moving it.
Let me ask Rainier, what's happening in Toronto, man?
Well,
Soca.
Renee, your mic is muted.
Unmute your mic, Renee.
okay. Yeah, to talk to Eric, so how I know about what soca is going on is my senior Canadian is the one who plays it for me because he's into.
Yep.
So he would find the new music, would play that to me for me. Wow, you know, and he's a next generation, he's a first generation Canadian. So the connection to Trinidad, but yeah, he's too young to go to fat something yet. But I'm sure when that happens, will go. But yeah, he's like he will start to be home and something or whatever.
The 16, 17-year-olds, that's what they're into.
Yeah.
But
Many
he
of us are going to be
he will
excused.
only put on.
Take care and thanks for being with us, Eric.
Pleasure was mine.
All
All
right.
right, Eric. See you.
Alrighty.
All right, yeah, man.
Vaughn, how the soca going in Washington, man?
Well, like I said, Nyla Blackman was just here. Every weekend they're having their soca parties. You know, the young people are driving it. I mean, my daughter, she would let me know who's coming in and who isn't coming in, and so on. You know, so there's growth in the soca movement, and but the elder generation, like myself and the others, aren't going in that vein. You know, aren't seeing it like that, aren't doing those things. You know, so I mean, it will continue.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask Rainier, drifting a little bit from the subject matter about Canada and its own elections coming up. And I am sure that even from this distance, that one of the issues must surely be whether Canada is going to become the 51st state of the USA.
Yeah, well, that has actually changed the conversation in terms of the election here completely. Prior to Trump coming into taking office, there was the Conservative, which is the opposition here. The Conservatives had a 20-point lead over the Liberal Party, the incumbent Liberal Party. Since Trump took office and started talking about the first state and tariffs and annexing us and stuff like that, that shift has now gone the other way. It's now a 20-point lead for the Liberals. And the reason is the new Liberal leader, the new Prime Minister of Canada, an economist. He was the central bank governor of Canada as well as the central bank governor of England. He's a politician. And he is seen, people are looking towards to the leaders to see which one has the better handle on Trump, who had a response to Trump. And they see Mark Carney, who's the Liberal leader, as the one who could handle Trump much more better way than the Conservative guy. So that shift has gone 20 the other way. Now the Liberals are 20 ahead of the Conservatives 2 weeks before the election. So that's a really interesting thing. 100% due to Trump.
Is that because there is some indication that the other party would be open to the blandishments and the greed of Donald Trump? Is that because of it?
I missed the question. Repeat it, please.
I'm saying this surge with the liberal support, is it because there is a fear that the other side can be open to the blandishments and the claims of Donald Trump and the threats even of Donald Trump?
Yeah. In fact, they actually call the considered light. And he is much more in line with Trump policies, which is totally against what Canadians value. And I think that's what has put him so far back, because people see him as being another Trump, and being very, very hard on immigration and very hard on this, on his policies and stuff like that. So, and he is the leader of that party. Has never held a job other than being an MP for life. So he's been an MP for 30 something. He's never worked in civil service. He's never worked in a field. Whereas Carney, as I said, was governor of central banks of both Canada and England. So from a policy economy, they see Carney as being the person who is better suited to deal with Trump's greens, threats of annexation and stuff like that. And in fact, Carney has traveled in his short time as prime minister. He has traveled and met with EU leaders and forming a sort of a alliance with them to fight off the Trump tariffs. So there's a big Canadian unity movement. Canadians of all stripes, of all colors, have united in the face of Trump's threats, and Carney is seen man, to take us forward. So that explains the 20-point lead that they went from 20 to 20.
Does it also have to do with the disappearance of the original leader? Was he so unpopular?
Well, Trudeau was very unpopular at the end. Coming to the last couple of months of his leadership, he's extremely unpopular. People saw him as being way too liberal with the immigrants. In fact, there's a running joke here now that they call Ontario Little Delhi, because we have so many Indian immigrants here. There was a lot of backlash for that. And his economic policies, people weren't fond of it. So there was a big against Trudeau. Trudeau did what did basically stepped aside and allowed this new guy to be. But in our case, our new guy was elected by the party, and you know, and it was a brilliant political strategy, and they've been in a place that now.
Yeah.
You know,
Let me
Trudeau
ask.
was not popular, except in the end, at the very, very end, became a little more because of the wasted of Trump. You know.
Vaughn, has anything like this from the West Indian community? Are they concerned at all with the politics of Canada, re-Trump and so on? Is there any concern, any interest?
No, no, I don't think so. I haven't seen or heard of any talk of interest of such, you know. Um, like I said, the most of the activities tend to circulate in the adult and the younger generation split. And so you have the discussions of like what we are talking about will be spoken about in family homes, you know, or in a buddy setting. And out of that, no major decision comes, you know, because it's guys who don't have power or anything like that, you know.
Right.
Um, and then the younger people, well, they are more into the fets. They are traveling a lot, going to the Caribbean, to Trinidad, Jamaica, and so forth, you know. And that's how it is, you know.
Rainier, where do West Indians come come forward in terms of Canadian politics? Where is their position? What is their position?
Well, you know, one of the things with West Indians in Canada is that we have always been far more engaged than the average immigrant. In because we come from countries where the politics is so um, us, you know, where we rallies and you know we don't know candidates and stuff. When there's an election here, we don't. Most of the candidates we don't even, you know, except from the one your own riding, you really don't know anybody else. But we still get involved because we think important to get involved and get it. In the past, the Caribbean community in Canada was acted by the different political parties. Nowadays, not so much. You may see an ad now and again in a community newspaper or so, but it's not as great as it used to be a long time. And one of the reasons for that, I don't see the Caribbean community as being financially involved in politics. They don't contribute. Communities, the other immigrant communities here get involved in terms of financial contributions, and by so doing, get themselves involved as candidates, potential candidates and stuff. If you look at this current political season right now, if you look at the campaign signs, for example, you'll see some names that you would be amazed. Is this Canada? You know, all sorts of long Sri Lankan name and Indian names. A lot of Indian people, Indian being continental Indians,
Well,
are running. Caribbean, I think there's one guy. I think he's Jamaican.
Yeah, I was in.
Much. Yeah.
I was in Toronto. Yeah, in October of last year, and the time before that was 5 or 6 years before that, and even in that period of time, I see quite a transformation in the population. A lot of Asians everywhere, and I was looking for West Indians at points in time. I suppose I don't know where they hang out, but I didn't run into too many of them. I hope they don't get displaced by the Asians and other people who coming in after. I know some of that has happened in the US. Yes, Vaughn?
Yes. But here in Washington, there's a small pocket of West Indians involved in the business. Restaurant, you know, you have Prong Bakery. They provide you the currants roll and the sweet bread and the food and so
So you
on.
could buy a currants roll in a shop.
Definitely, man. I mean, I get that every week, you know. A dose of currants roll, butter bread, and sweet bread. That's my dose, you know.
And of course, roti and polori and thing had
Definitely
been there for a long time.
All of that is being sold, you know. The roti. Then on the Jamaican side, they got the oxtail and rice and peas and so forth, you know. So that is going. It goes. It sustains people. Give them a chance to maintain that sense of home, you know.
Yeah. Incidentally, Vaughn, I interviewed on this program last week or week before a good colleague of yours, man, Ian Smart.
Oh
He
yes,
was,
yeah,
he
yeah,
just
yeah.
launched a book on Carnival.
Yes, yeah,
And
yeah,
I had him on the program, I think it was last week,
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about the book.
yeah.
And he mentioned you, man. He says he is or was a great fan of your program.
Well, yeah, yeah. Ian and I, we did an interview. Ian and I did an interview some 30, 40 years ago and happened to see it on YouTube. And that brought us back into doing another interview to bringing up the state of Carnival, in its present sense. We all wrote a book called A Come Back Home.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
we
Talked
come to
about that also.
Trinidad, take the stuff and bring it back, and then practice Carnival within the communities that you live in North America and so forth.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being on the program. I know I worked you over time without double pay, not even single pay. But I thank you very much. And Sir Charles, I am sure, is very thankful. And this new venture of his, just to say, I keep saying it every time I get on the air, that it's a venture of Sir Charles. A man who has been at the DJ slot for a long, long time.
Yes, man.
In fact, he goes back to Lord Superior, something you
Yes,
might remember.
definitely.
Remember when
Trying to buy a radio, wanted to buy a radio station.
his own station and so on. So
Right.
Charles was there with him.
Yes, I
Yes,
was.
Remember that?
Yeah, and the station that Sir Charles was on has gone to a far country. A
Right,
good way
right.
to put it.
Right.
Carlo has started up his own thing, and we, of course, wish him all the best. So,
Yeah,
gentlemen, thank you again giving us
Before
this
you leave, Tony, I
opportunity.
just want to say that
They were just
one of the things that I have is a YouTube TV channel where I produce programs. A program, for example, called Caribbeana History in Sound, where I took a look at the history of the Caribbean through its music, calypso, reggae, and cadence music, and interviewed people like Roland Tiger, Roaring Lion, Chocolates. All of these people are in that series,
Oh.
and it's a worthwhile series to check out. So they
Okay.
can just go to YouTube Caribbeana TV.
Rainier, thank you very much for your time and your knowledge.
no problem.
Take care, man.
I'm glad to support you with your venture there. And anytime I can be of service, feel free to call me.
Right, man.
You know.
Take care. All the best.
All right, man. Bye.
You and Vaughn.
All right.
Yeah.
Sir Charles.
Take care, Vaughn. Bye.
Right. Take care, Rainier.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you very much for your distinguished guests this evening.
Right.
So I'm leaving you with the Mighty Sparrow as we go. All right?
Yeah, before you go there, just want to say that tomorrow we have an interesting program in that I know of 3 youngsters from Trinidad who are going to South Africa on a kind of vacation, seeing the sights, getting in touch with what has happened and so on. And we have them talking about their expectations. And we also have someone who has been on the trip to South Africa, lending her own experience to it. So it should be an interesting program, different from the politics and so on. We take a 1-day break from it, right?
No problem. It's always got to have difference in between them.
Yeah. And I am hoping, just to inform our listeners, and Charlo, I haven't spoken to you about it yet because I know I am sure that Thursday on the holiday we should have a program, but if it's okay with you, I want to get a priest or 2 in to talk about Easter and the holiness of it. Maybe Trinidad and Tobago needs some of that. Remember,
I am sure
the
that we
former
do.
police Commissioner say we want some prayers. So maybe that would be a good thing.
That is excellent, man. I like the idea of it, Tony.
Right. So keep in touch, and we'll be back on the air tomorrow afternoon in the drive time.
Okay, people, this has been your Drive Time Exchange with Tony Fraser.
I think and you should face issue, but you're behaving like a moron, cussing me for way I'm born, but your pipe ain't had no water. You pay too much for butter. Take your steel beam and go. The terrible school system is such a bloody problem. Take your steel beam and go. Agriculture's in a state, planning is inadequate. Take your steel beam and go. The northern and southern idol, the two kingpins of bubble. We know we like it so. We like it so. We anything that's wrong, he go put it right. Georgie Bodgie tell we the other night. So instead of displaying impatience, cool yourself and give the fella a chance. How the hell you could say, oh, and I go do better? We go send you back Grenada in a drum. We and Georgie going to put it right together, yeah. We have freeness and freedom, plenty roti, plenty rum. Hospitals have no linen, it's brown paper they're using. Take your steel beam and go. Public transportation is an abomination. Take your steel beam and go. Well, food, clothes and rent is proof. Cost of living gone through the roof.